Nuestro próximo conferenciante es un personaje. Su nombre es David Walters y ha sido un mogul en la industria de la música. En el 2003 vendió su compañía a Sony y ha sido una estrella como agente deportivo. Entre sus clientes estuvo José Juan Barea, pero ha cerrado acuerdos de cientos de millones de dólares para muchos estrellas de la NBA. Está con nosotros, él es uno de los co-founders de Puerto Rico Icon, y de los datos curiosos que me parecieron muy simpáticos es que el padrino de su primera boda fue Adam Sandler, y la película Happy Gilmore viene porque él se llama Happy Walters. Así que reciban con un fuerte aplauso a Happy Walters.
I hope he said good things because I didn't understand anything. So we have our panel that's going to come up. Please grab a seat, guys. We're the last panel I know, so you guys can get to the bar as soon as we're done. Do you have Lee? Okay, here's an extra. So as you guys know, this is a panel on kind of raising capital, private equity, startup funding. How many of you here are looking for startup funding now? Show of hands. Okay, how many of you are kind of mid-stage looking for a Series B or follow-on funding? One. Private equity, so that means actually a little bit higher, bigger checks? The one? Okay, cool. Well, the good news is all these guys love writing checks. They brought their checkbooks with them. They love startups, so you got good guys around to help. So what we'll do here, we'll start off by having each of the guys introduce themselves, give you a quick bio. My bio, other than what was just said about sports, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started a dozen companies in the last 25 years. I've exited about 10, some great, some good, couple not so great. Started the music business, managed Tupac and a bunch of rappers, and started a record label that I sold to Sony, and then started producing movies and TV shows and getting into sports. In the last 10 years, I've been a blockchain tech investor and a healthcare investor. Taken a bunch of companies public and had a lot of fun doing it. I've lived here in Puerto Rico for the last 5 years. Okay, Enrique, go ahead, buddy.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I left when I was 15 years old. Studied in the U.S. and then had my career in the U.S. and internationally in Brazil, Spain, and a couple of other countries. I was a management consultant. Then I moved into real estate development. I was based in New York for the last 15 years and just recently came back to the island. Happy to be back home. A lot of family here, a lot of memories. I have 3 kids, and I started angel investing probably in 2006. I was a business school student at Stanford, and there's a nice community of entrepreneurs and venture investors, and I got excited about it then. And then in the last few years, had some good success, some exits, and started dedicating full time to doing venture, both on the angel side, where I'm kind of sector agnostic, although I do focus on early stage, and then I have a fund focused on specifically mental health venture, just an area I'm passionate about. I think with all my investing, I try to focus on areas where founders are trying to do good for the world as well as generating a return. Life's too short. Thanks.
Lee Underwood, a serial entrepreneur as well. I started my first company at 22 years old and had 96 employees on day one. The company is still in existence today, 14 different nationalities on day one. I exited that company about a dozen years ago, but it's still going strong. The next 2 companies, businesses I started were within large investment banks. Both of those ended up in very successful exits. The first one grew to $24 billion in assets in 4 years. Sold that business to Bank of America. The second one, we raised $3 billion in a year and a half. Later took that company public and then merged it. And my most current company will have its 20-year anniversary in a couple months. So that's kind of what I did. Day job. Really now I spend most of my time running our family office. I've been doing angel investments, private equity investments, venture capital investments, hedge fund investments, private debt investments. We invest in the whole spectrum of alternatives. On the angel side, I've had probably 25 years of the worst track record ever in history. You all have, want to bore yourselves to sleep or spend 5 hours, come talk to me about all the companies that I did that went to zero. There's a lot of them. But one that everybody wants to talk about is obviously the one that did work, which was a company called Canva, where I was their first investor, did their first round, their second round. We sold some shares at a $40 billion valuation about a year ago. That kind of sums up that one. Waikit?
Hi, my name is Waikit Lau. Like these gentlemen here, I'm a serial startup guy, glutton for punishment. I find that I learned a lot about investing by being an entrepreneur, and I learned a lot about startups by investing. I trained as an engineer 20 plus years ago. Started my first. I tend to run companies when there's a major meltdown in the market. This is my third meltdown. So I started my first company in '99, went through the 2000 meltdown. The company ended up getting acquired by a software company named GoDaddy that you guys might be familiar with. Spent some time in the VC world, learned the trade a little bit. After that, started my second company that's in the software space that does online advertising. We got a little luckier on that one, ended up merging with another company and taking it public. We lived through the 2008 meltdown. I think we were, like 5 days away from shutting down, not being able to make payroll until we were able to close a bridge round of financing. And then I'm running my current company, my third company now, and I've kind of felt like I've had a lot of scar tissues. And so this company, we're trying to do it a little bit differently than going down the venture capital route. But throughout the last 15, 20 years, I've done angel investments in mostly technology across software, consumer, some hardware as well. And I've seen all kinds of regimes. I think, whatever worked 20 years ago is not going to work. I think there's sort of very different ways of fundraising and what investors will look for. So anyway, looking forward to diving in with you guys.
Thanks, guys. So let me just kind of go over a little bit of what we're going to talk about, and I want to leave time for questions. I think, you guys are getting all this information, but it's really helpful if you guys can ask specific things and we can give you like direction answers that are clear. Kind of the basics of investing in general, what, an angel investor looks for in evaluating an opportunity, how to structure the right deal, what are the different options between convertible debt, venture, friends and family, angel, a safe, some of those things. I don't know if everyone knows what those are, but I think it's important to kind of get a quick rundown of that. And then, Lee coined something the other day when we were speaking about this, where he mentioned, it was venture capital last year. This year, it's vulture capital because of what's happened in the market. And for those of you that don't know today, Waikit was referring to like FTX had a meltdown, which is affecting the entire blockchain crypto world. Binance is taken them over, from what I understand. This all happened today. So let's start with, Lee, I'd love for you to talk about kind of what you've seen in the last 6 or 8 months and, how things have changed and now where you are, what you're really looking for when you're looking and talking to some of the people out here and seeing what you guys want to do in early stage investment.
Sure. So we think about companies in different stages of their progress differently. In other words, we have a different set of criteria for a startup. I have founders that come to me with their ideas on a napkin, right? So we treat that opportunity very differently than we treat somebody coming to me who's wanting to raise capital, who has, 400 employees and needs to raise $25 million, right? And they're profitable and they've been around for 15 years. So we really think about each sub-asset class completely differently. So in the early stage, for example, our criteria kind of breaks down into 2 categories. One is the business opportunity, right? And the business itself. And so is it just a massive, big opportunity, right? Is there some indication of a product market fit? Are the first customers, just rabidly passionate customers and are, telling the world and singing the world of your praises? Does the business have the potential for high levels of capital efficiency, right? Does the founding team have a history of equity value creation? So that's kind of how we think about, like, when somebody comes to me with, I got this great idea, just let me borrow a napkin, right? And they start writing stuff down. So that's one category. The other category that is very, very important to us is we actually have a scorecard for the founders. And the founders scorecard, you don't have to have a perfect 10. It's okay to be really big in one category and weaker in others, but you have to be strong in one of these and frankly exceptional in at least one of these. You need to have relentless perseverance, a borderline obsession. Actually, the more obsessive you are, the more I like it. You have to know your customer inside, out, backwards, forwards, upside down. Like, if I ask you about your customer and you say, well, I haven't really thought about that, our meeting's over, right? Like, you really need to be an expert on who is going to be your customer. You do have to have product and technology expertise. It really helps if you have great communication skills with team, investors, and partners. It is a super help if you are an all-star recruiter, because very few companies get started and grow to huge businesses just by being 1 or 2 people. You have to be able to recruit the best and the brightest. Ideally, you'd have a category advantage in some sector. I like investor or founders who are aggressive and fast. I like investors who can very quickly fail. I know that sounds crazy, but what I look for is investors who can do small tests and fail very quickly. In other words, iterate, change, evolve. That is just mission critical in a startup. And then, you have to be more than a visionary, or at least somebody in your team has to be more than a visionary. There needs to be somebody in the team who is just very detail-oriented. So those are kind of the checklists that we look for in a startup.
Great answer. Either of you guys want to add anything to that, or he pretty much covered everything? Go
Yeah,
for it.
he did cover. I mean, it comes down to, and it's kind of cliche by now, but you're betting on people, especially your early stage. So you need really strong founders, and you know all the things that Lee said are true. And you need people that can execute. Obviously, you know some people have a track record before that, and that's takes a lot of the risk off investors. So if you've had success in the past, that's obviously very attractive, but it's not a deal killer. Then you got to go through kind of the other checklist to make sure that this is someone that can deliver and execute.
Right. And so when you guys do find something you're interested in, what kind of deals do you prefer to, like what structures do you guys prefer? What do you typically do? Most startup entrepreneurs don't really, know. And if you're in early, you can kind of guide that. I don't know, Enrique or Waikit, one of you guys want to jump on that?
Yeah, so I tend to be on the earlier side. I tend to invest in,
Ideas.
two-person
You're really
with an
early.
idea,
Yeah.
like super early, first round. And what that means is 99% of these would fail, right? And some would fail fast, some would take a few years. And, I almost feel like I've seen so many of these, right? Like, thousands of them over the years, and I've done 50 to low hundreds of deals over the last 10, 15 years. And I always think that, like, the more I see and the less I know, right? Because there's really no formula, right? You see themes and you see history, not necessarily repeating, but it rhymes. So I think to your question, I think a lot of it is a lot of what Will said just now, but there's also a lot of the softer stuff, right? Which is how much, like Lee said, do you understand your customer? How much of the process have you, because by definition, you're going to be under-resourced, you're going to be understaffed, under, money, right? So the question always that you have to ask is, how do you ruthlessly prioritize? Do you know what you need to do to get to the next milestone, right? So a lot of these is just really you understanding what the next milestone is for you to be able to raise the next round and then working that backwards, right? And a lot of times, what I tell my companies are, you're going to get distracted by 5,000 things, but ultimately, let's go back to first principles, right? Is whether you're a product company or a service company, right? It's all about you have to build a product or the service, and then you have to sell it. That's really it, right? Obviously, there's a lot of things that just add up, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs, first time or serial entrepreneurs, I think sometimes they forget that, right? They end up spending time on things that may not move the meter. So I think a lot of what I look at when it's really early, there are no numbers, there are no hard things. I look for, have they talked to customers? Do they understand customers? Like Lee said, have they ruthlessly really understand the persona and the nature of the problem their product and service would solve? If they do, it really shows when you talk to the entrepreneur. So,
I mean, Waikit, who I've invested with a few times, is really early. I mean, pre-revenue a lot of times, which increases your risk. Enrique, I know you do a bunch of different things, but how do you view something that has some revenue? Do you look at it differently? What kind of deal would you structure with that as compared to someone out here who's just starting with a great idea?
Yeah, well, I've invested in some companies that have no revenue. Those have typically been companies that have very strong or unique IP and that they can protect from competition. In the case of my fund that focuses on mental health, there are drug development companies that have patents, right? They don't have revenue, but they have patents, or they have scientists that are working on patents. And that's something I know that they can protect and build a business on. So yeah, that's basically
how you view it. Okay, I mean, Lee, I'd love for you to kind of touch a little bit on when these guys and women, guys and girls, guys and gals, whatever is politically correct, he, she, him, her, whatever, as they're out here figuring things out, early stage investors, typically someone's going to say, hey, my company's worth $1 million, I want 100,000, you get 10%, right? But that's the simple, default. Can you explain a little bit how like convertible debt works or a SAFE or not just straight equity investments so everyone here understands that and then has optionality going forward?
Yeah, so
If that's cool.
yeah, now I'm going to go back to what the prior speaker said. That really, in most of these cases, especially in the earlier stage, higher risk zip code, the terms are dictated by whatever the investor is willing to do. We can talk about converts and safes and all of these structures, and your legal team will advise you on, the pluses and minuses of those. I don't know if that's exactly the right venue for this, but like what I will tell you is when the economy is slow and when the markets are down, fundraising gets hard, right? And one of the first questions I ask if an investor or a founder has already raised cash, the first question I ask is, when is your cash zero date? Right? The answer to that tells me how dire a situation is it. Like, are you, as Waikit talked about, are you 5 days away from going to zero? Right? If you're in that position, you are in no way, form, or fashion able to negotiate any terms. You will take whatever it takes to make the company survive. So yes, I think it's very important to have the right structure. There's pros and cons versus safes, converts and all these various structures. But really, if I've learned anything over 30 years and multiple cycles in the market, it's for the founders, always be raising money. Raise more than you need and be very, very careful with how you're spending it. Because there are very, very good companies in today's market that go away because they don't manage their business properly and they run out of cash. Or the worst case scenario, they have to ask for cash when they need it. That's the worst time to ask for money, is when you actually need it, right? I did a conference call last Thursday with a company that I've done the first 2 rounds in, and it's this incredible, robotic farm in a greenhouse, and it's incredible. A week ago, they were telling me how they were going to do an IPO for a SPAC. I got a call a couple days ago telling me, oh yeah, forget that conversation. We're now going to do what they call a cram down round. And that means if you don't invest in this round, all of your prior investments were wiped out.
You're out of business.
You're out of business. So this concept of moving from venture capital to vulture capital, we are now in that zip code. So, don't worry so much about the structure. Just find out a good, solid investor who, buys into your vision and ideally can add strategic value. That would be my recommendation. Let the investor drive the terms as long as they're not crazy.
But wearing the investor hat, because times have changed, we're probably not going into deals where we know the entrepreneur has to raise money in just 3 to 6 months or something like that. We don't want to go back out to the market, when times are worse than now. So ideally, you have runway, like Lee was saying, that can last you, for 18 to 24 months. And if that means, tightening up on costs and maybe not going after your full kind of potential, you slow down now. And you try to raise enough money to get you through 1.5 to 2 years. Because new investors coming in are really going to be hesitant to back a company that doesn't have runway.
Yeah. Waikit, anything you want to add, or?
Yeah, I think the only thing is, if you're early stage, there's so much resources out in the internet these days, right? That you actually don't have to necessarily pay that much for a lawyer, right? So if you're doing a very simple safe note, so safe note.
Explain what that is.
So safe note is a simple agreement for future equity. And, so historically, 20 years ago, when you raise your first round, most investors, VCs, would invest via an instrument called convertible debt, right? So they'll put in, let's say, $1 million at some discount to a future price. They don't know what the future price is.
A future valuation of the next
future
round.
valuation, exactly, right? Because it's hard to value the company in the beginning, right? So they'll say, whatever the real round, the equity round that happens in the next round, whatever price evaluation it is, will get a 20% discount, right? Sometimes they put a cap on it. The problem with convertible debt note historically is that it's a pretty thick document. It's a lot of legalese, and sometimes you need a lawyer. If you're good enough, you may not. You kind of know what the clauses are. In the last 10, 15 years, that has gone mostly away. A lot of legal firms have kind of simplified that to essentially what is a 3-pager document called a safe note, which has a lot less legalese. In fact, a lot of entrepreneurs these days, they could raise money without engaging a lawyer, right? So they'll read through it, they'll go to all the resources. I highly recommend Y Combinator. Y Combinator has a lot of resources around deal terms, what is standard and what isn't. So the key thing for you guys is really to figure out what's standard, what's non-standard, and for the standard terms, what they mean. You don't have to pay for lawyers, right? So that's my one recommendation, that you can do a lot of this understanding by yourself.
Yeah, great points. And I think, one thing I just want to mention from what Will was saying earlier, and then we can open it to some questions. He said, never, ever, ever, no matter what, take money from friends and family. And that is a good thing to think about, but there's always a but to everything, right? In this market, if you really believe in something and you are having a hard time raising money, especially pre-revenue. Now, I looked at some of the different businesses in this that we got, and there are a lot of you guys out there that are pre-revenue and with really good ideas. It's okay to do that if you have to. It's not your first choice, it's your last choice, but it's better than no choice, in my opinion. Will may smack me later. He's bigger than me, so I don't know. We'll see.
To be fair, as an investor, because you have a network, at some point you might invest in a friend, and I have, and frankly, it doesn't always go bad. I've been pretty successful investing in friends who I know are really smart and who have a track record, and I've been following for a long time. It kind of de-risks it. But obviously, the risk is you'll never talk to them again if it goes bad.
Right. And if you do well with friends, it's always more fun, right? Everyone's making money together.
My first company that I started, Will, I borrowed money from my mother to start my company. And do you know why I went to borrow money from my mother? Is because I asked money from my dad, and he said no. And my parents are divorced.
Because of the business or before the business?
This and it ended up being okay.
No, it's okay. So let's open up some questions. Maybe you guys we have 15 minutes left. Are there mics to pass around, or you guys have a mic or two? Oh, you can jump up and go ahead if you're real close by.
Thanks. So one thing that I've heard a couple times right now is that always be raising money. And I've been hesitant a little bit to do that because I want to make sure that I have the pipeline to fulfill that. Now, no one has equity in my company except me, which goes to one of the previous speaker about king or rich. So I'm trying to understand at what point do I give equity so that I can then develop the business so I could actually grow it, which goes back to the scale thing. So I know it's a bit of a complex question, but the way I structure the fundraising that I've done, it's just based on splits according to the different deals that I'm doing. So it's kind of a mixture of a loan/equity deal. So just, I don't know, get any insights.
Yeah, I mean, real estate's a bit different because you're usually, as a developer, doing it on a deal-by-deal basis, right? So I don't think it applies as much as you always got to be raising for your next round because you actually got to have a deal in place that you've locked up or you've got under contract before you actually bring investors in. Right. But you're not trying to build a company. You're trying to build a project, right? And that specific project gets debt and equity. I think what they were referring to is if you're building like a venture business from like an early stage, you need to think about, all right, the next round, how much money do I have to raise? And what milestones do I have to hit to be able to raise that capital, and what value will the company have when I'm hit those milestones? Yeah.
One other thing I would add, every business is a little bit different. Your path is more like an asset management business, right? Where eventually, once you build a track record and the first couple deals you've done have been realized and have good returns, then your trajectory would be to start a real estate private equity fund.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
And then what you would do is you would either yourself or you would hire a placement agent like an investment bank, and you would go out and raise institutional capital, right? You would go out and raise money from endowments and foundations and insurance companies and pension funds, and you'd go to them and you'd say, hey, look, I'm starting a fund to do this investment opportunity in real estate. We're going to plan on doing 10 deals. My track record shows that I have a 35% IRR. I've made, all my investors 3.2 times distributed paid-in capital, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a different animal. That's more of an asset management trajectory where your goal would be to, eventually raise a lot of money and then deploy it into real estate. That's a little bit different than what we've been talking about, where you're talking about starting up a company like
Yeah, and quickly before we go to the next question, you can also put together $10 million through the people you've already have invested with you, and buy multiple units and have an underlying asset too before you get to Lee's stage, because there's sometimes a happy medium. Okay, go ahead. I know you have a question back there.
So what do you guys see as like the main Puerto Rico risk factors that are maybe differentiating Puerto Rico from the mainland when you're considering investments? And how can we make Puerto Rico more kind of vanilla and more in line with kind of mainland?
More what? Sorry?
More vanilla, like make it easier to invest in Puerto Rico, make it more kind of standard.
I mean, Waikit can start. I've done a lot of stuff here already, so I don't know about it.
Yeah, I mean, if your product or service can be delivered virtually or quasi-virtually, right? Think internet, service, product, what have you. I mean, I think COVID has changed the game, right? 2 years ago, if you're not in any of the metro areas, it's hard to raise money, right? You're not in New York, you're not in San Francisco, you're not in LA, you're kind of second-class citizen when it comes to raising money. I think now anything goes, right? I think now you could be a startup company in Belarus as long as you're showing good growth rate, good margins. People will do a deal, whether in e-commerce, some service, and the like. So, and one question, going back to your point, right? Anything can be productized, like Open Door, right? That's a product company, but that's a house flipping business, right? So again, it's all about, the real metrics now, I think, which I think is a lot better for entrepreneurs.
Are you asking about investing in local businesses, or are you talking about exporting an idea?
So we've raised some capital in the last 18 months, and most of the no's we got were not because, or maybe they're just being nice, but they said Puerto Rico's a little bit like too different for us. If you were a Delaware company, or if you were based in California, New York, Florida, it would be easier for us to invest in you. So
that's a structure question. That's more of a structure question.
Right. And so the question is like, how would you guys like to see Puerto Rico pitched, and why do you come to Puerto Rico? How did you overcome that barrier, I guess, might be the better question.
Do you sell your businesses outside of Puerto Rico or just in Puerto Rico?
Both.
Well, what's the business?
real estate data business.
Yeah, I think like Waikit said, I think the stigma around having a business that's from Puerto Rico is melting away, like it has for many other regions around the world, because you can now have a business based anywhere really, and deliver services or technology to anywhere in the world. And because of COVID, people moved, and very smart people, very successful people moved all over the world, different places. So I think that has kind of started to melt away, you know, so.
But what I would also say is structurally, you could set up an LLC
In Delaware?
in Delaware that would then invest here, and that should allay any concerns of those investors. I've done that, and it's been fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? A mic somewhere. Yep.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Herrera, and I have a food service and product here based out of Puerto Rico, looking to expand around outside of Puerto Rico. I now have gotten clear that I'm not looking to scale, I'm looking to pivot before scaling. And prior to an actual financial investor, I'm looking for a mentor / strategic partner and investor. Is this person in the room? What is the title or role of this person? And how does one begin to even establish that relationship to be able to then grow and scale?
Everyone's like, good question. Let me get this right. You have a business and you want a mentor to help you figure out how to scale outside of Puerto Rico?
I've been in business now for the past 3 years, and I've realized that prior to scaling, I want to pivot first.
Pivot to what? A different business?
Same industry, I want to digitize it, and I want to expand it globally. Based in Puerto Rico, but looking for the possibility of having a headquarters possibly in New York, maybe Hunts Point Food Market, Bronx. It's a food product and service.
Got it.
I mean, I think first you got to break up into what are the sort of advice that you want, right? Is it the business side? Is it more domain oriented? And again, I think this day and age, you know, a cold email or cold outreach on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or wherever, right? If it's well crafted enough, could resonate, right? I think that's really the trick, right? The trick is, how do you write something that's very succinct, that intrigues the other person to take a meeting with you, right? I think that's step one. I think step two is that once you're in that meeting, right, you know, you want to pick someone's brain, right? I think people respect and like the fact that, you know, they're viewed as an expert and you're approaching him or her to get, you know, to pick their brain for expertise. I think people enjoy doing that and helping others, other entrepreneurs out. I think that's the angle. But I think the first thing you got to figure out is what sort of expertise or mentors that you need. I've done that throughout, like, my career. And I think the hardest part is just crafting that message, right? You need a hook that someone says, oh, this is really interesting. I'll take a meeting. Why not? Half an hour. So.
Sure.
Here's how I do it. There's a woman who spent time in Silicon Valley, may still be there. She founded something called Zoom Pizza. She went to the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where Enrique went. So what I would do is I would research her. She went to the Stanford GSB. I'd pitch Enrique that you need a connection to get introduced to her, because she'd be a great mentor. She used technology. She had robots making pizzas in mobile vans. And so the pizza would be fresh and hot right when it got to your house. That's how I do it, as someone who just spent the last 30 years in the Silicon Valley and now has planted his feet here in Puerto Rico.
Good idea.
And what's your name?
Michael Lurdo. And I'm here to learn everything I can about private equity because I haven't been on that side of the table. I've been on the entrepreneurial side of the table, having to figure out how to get that first customer or that strategic partner or come up with a great strategy for numerous startups.
Very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity of having this amazing panel. My question is very simple. I would love to hear your experience living in Puerto Rico, if you enjoy being in this beautiful island. And I want to thank you for choosing Puerto Rico to be your home. And thank you, Enrique, for coming back home. This is very important for us. And I feel blessed that we're bringing, people like you to invest in Puerto Rico and to believe in the entrepreneurs of Puerto Rico. For us, Sandra and I, it's a blessing of being here and hearing all these stories because it's a motivation to keep going. We are, we say it, empresarias empedernidas. We love to work, and we work really hard, and we have, everything to make it happen. And hearing all these stories just motivate us. So I would love to hear your experience in living in Puerto Rico.
I mean, I can go. I mean, I've been here 5 years. I really like it. My family loves it. I've invested in a couple businesses here. I don't know if anyone's heard of Burrito Social or Burger Social. Oh, thank you. So I went to Burrito Social like 3 years ago or something, and I loved the food. I started talking to the owner, and he wanted to expand. And he told me about this burger concept he had. He worked at Shake Shack in New York. He was a chef. He's Puerto Rican, went to the Culinary Institute, decided he wanted to make burgers, opened the very first Shake Shack. Then he got recruited away by BurgerFi to open BurgerFi's out of Florida, and then decided, hey, why shouldn't I come back home and do this? And I loved his vibe and his idea, the nicest guy. And so we opened one in Guaynabo, and it did really well. We opened it during COVID, right before it happened, but it still did great. We just opened one in Condado. We're building one in Ponce, and the goal is to have like 10 of those on the island, and he's expanded Burrito Social to Tampa and a few places in the U.S. And so investing in a local entrepreneur, each store employs 30 people. The goal is to have 300 jobs with 10 of those. So I love it, and it's a lot of opportunities, and there are really hardworking, really good people here as well. And there's coupons tomorrow in the goodie bags for free burgers and shakes, by the way.
Hi, my name is Mario Torres, and this might be a little bit off topic, but do you guys have any recommendations for nonprofits?
Use Canva. Canva has a free program for Canva Pro for nonprofits. You could use Canva's most advanced technology for free.
Question over there, I think. There's one in the back.
Adianis Correa. I've been working on a small hotel. It's a boutique hotel in Luquillo, Puerto Rico, and it's been about 3 years. I have it under contract. I've had now one extension. I'm going to have another extension. Why? Because I've been working so hard with trying to get an SBA loan. It's taken just so long, and their requirements are excessive. But I'm fine with it as long as I just did not have the proper mentorship, I would say, or no mentorship. So I've just been learning along this process. And now I'm trying to pivot to get funding for this hotel. It's under contract, so I just wonder, I'm not sure what kind of advice you can give for someone that's pivoting from the old school bank mortgage, that type of mentality to actually bringing on investors, or even how I'm going to be able to pitch this to investors, where generally it's really for a product, not so much of a service.
So I think you have to go at it backwards, right? You have to take a look at, what your projected revenues are, what your capital expenses are, and so forth. and figure out exactly how much money you need. Unfortunately, in times like this where the economy is slowing, interest rates are going up, you can get funding. There's a lot of other funding sources besides banks, but with interest rates rising, the cost of that capital is going to get expensive. And so, we can spend more time talking about it offline if you want, but there's lots of different structures that you can do, but you have to figure out whether the cost of borrowing money is going to be too expensive.
I think there's a question there.
Thank you, guys. Francisco Lavoy, John Moji. We design and build wind turbines, micro wind turbines for microgrid deployments, and we use AI in the development. We find ourselves in this dilemma today. We are an Act 83 company here. We've been building research and development credits in the island, and we have, I would say, there's a big interest from different venture capital firms, both in Europe as well as here. The difference is that the ones here in Puerto Rico are very much interested in the tax credits that we already have. And the ones from Europe, they have no idea what those are. We can deliver carbon credits, we can tokenize carbon credits, we can do a lot of things regarding RECs and so on, but when it comes to Puerto Rican check credits, it's a completely different ballgame. So the dilemma is that the local ones are not as aggressive and perhaps don't offer the same benefits and conditions as the ones in other countries. But they do offer, we have a gaining point as we have those credits. Let's just say that we have about $1 million worth of credits that we can use to our advantage. They can be used as collateral in some cases, or it can be used in different ways. I was just wondering your take on, have you been in such a situation since you've been involved in Puerto Rico? I'm sure you've worked with tax credits in the past year, maybe. Any recommendations on that end?
I mean, I have experience with tax credits here for film and television shooting, but I can't really help you from your perspective. I don't think it's not the same because, as you know, the government allocates in the budget how much for specific credits. So like with film and television, depending on Puerto Rico's state of affairs, they'll take the credits away, they'll lower them without any kind of notice. Is it the same with the credits you deal with, or no? No, it's locked?
Locked. There's no cap.
There's a cap. There's no cap. Okay.
Film credits, there's a cap. There are 35 million, I think, right now. Not with R&D credits.
Okay. I don't know. Have you guys had any experience here?
I have not. Can't you sell the credits and then?
Yeah, they're fully transferable.
You can sell them now at a discount to anybody. That's what film production does.
8%.
They bank it and they'll take a 20% discount or something.
It sounds like you're saying you're getting better term sheets or better terms from the European investors than you are from local VC.
But you could actually use the money. I mean, the tax credit can be used as a way to reinvest in the company by the local company rather than, you wouldn't have those benefits from those companies. And we work so hard for them. I mean, we can always sell them, I granted, yes, but we love to work, to play around with them if possible.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for a foreign investor to digest that. I mean, it'd probably be easy to tell them, hey, they're worth this if we trade them in the market, and that's part of our value proposition. That's part of the economics of the business. Because,
There's a guy here I'll introduce you to, Dave Wiebel, who specializes in tax credits for various things. He lives here in Dorado. He may be a really good person. So give me your info after this, and I'll connect you guys.
Thank you very much. Gracias.
Okay, I think we're actually over unless there's one more question. Did you want to ask? Go ahead. Yeah, you can. You are the one person that we're looking for a bigger check, so no problem.
It's a very specific question, and I want to take advantage to actually ask advice. I think this is aimed mostly at Lee. We have a legacy business that is a market leader here, and it's done well. We probably could have raised funding and told the story better, and we had opportunities to grow it much more than we did. But we wanted to, I don't know, do it on our own, do it without raising, and we kind of learned that wasn't maybe the best course. We've developed and launched a new product in the last year that has a greater opportunity than what we had with our legacy business. The legacy business still runs, or I'll get to the point. In telling the story, in growing, we're in a very real position where this we'll be raising likely in the next 2 years at a $250 million valuation. In the last 3 years, we've raised 3 times, and we've doubled the value each time, 8 million to 17 to 32, right now at 60. My question is, some of the investors we brought on, we had the luxury of being able to choose. We chose strategic investors with more experience, and that's been incredible. But what we also have now is, hey, well, we'll fund right now at 45. We just raised. It's been 6 months since we closed the last round. Fundraising takes time, a lot of my time. And either I am focused on raising funds and putting together and having the meetings and proving the concept, or we're growing the business. In terms of telling the story, I can raise very quickly at 45, which gives us 18 months more or less without any concerns, and likely we've hit our revenue, our projections 2 years in a row, so we have a good story. We said we would do this, we raised, we built it, we launched it, it worked. We said we would grow at this speed, we exceeded that. We said we would raise, so we've kind of checked every box. Am I hurting our story if I take the easy route, take our internal investors and let them come in at 45 when we have legitimate interest at 60, that if I put 3 to 6 months into and really focus on it, we will get it? What do you recommend?
I think it's a question of runway right now. How long of a runway do you have, right now? And
I should give context. We have 6 to 8 months right now with where we could quite easily scale down our growth, not hit our targets, and we'd have virtually indefinite. But we're at that crossroads of working. We've got partners in other markets ready to launch it.
Is it an equity? Is it an equity deal? Valuation, a set valuation, and you're raising X amount at a certain time?
60 million
right.
is an equity.
Right.
But one of our partners prefers convertible notes and is interested in that.
Got it.
And yeah, so we have a range.
60 was a priced round.
Sorry?
The 60 million was a priced round. It was not a safe. It was a priced round.
Happening right now, so not it was.
Oh, okay. So what was the previous round?
32.
And that was priced or just safe? Priced. Take the money back.
You take the money.
I
think 100.
Make it
Look,
quick at 45.
Yep.
We have a Goldman Sachs economist that advises us, and we spend a lot of time trying to look into the future. And I think the economy, broadly speaking, in the United States, a year from now, is going to be very different than the one we have today, right?
Agree.
We believe that the Federal Reserve is going to keep raising rates until something breaks. Very few businesses, like when something breaks and liquidity gets pulled out of the market, like the worst place you can be in as a founder is to ask for money and need money when everybody has what we call, where I grew up in Texas, alligator arms. You know what alligator arms are?
Little arms like
your
this.
arms are too short because you can't reach your wallet that's in your pocket. Oh, I can't get there. Like, you don't want to be asking for money when the market has no liquidity. Ask Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX, who had $1.5 billion of withdrawals yesterday. A week ago, he was having a Twitter war with somebody. That same guy that he was having a war with just bought his business for basically zero.
And also 20% discount in today's market from 60 to 45.
But it's still up
it's
on the
not
last
bad.
round. You're still up on the last round.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
no, I know
your
that,
other
yeah.
investors will be happy.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Take
and
it.
by the way, so this round is this are these all the same investors, or are you bringing in new blood?
At 45, it would be the existing. It would be the right of first refusal would take the whole pocket. There wouldn't be any new blood. If we go to 60, it'll be a mix.
Take what you can at 40, take what you can at 45, and hit your target numbers, and be careful with your cash, because I think next year could be harder than it has been in the last 15 years.
And frankly, you must be doing very well if your inside investors are willing to give you an up round from a valuation from 6 months ago, because almost everything right now is a flat round or a down round if you've raised 6 months ago.
We oversubscribed and we weren't letting in, and we let in an investor that normally comes in at volume
so he's got
higher amounts, 20 million plus, and they
Okay.
came in for less. So they were like, listen, we want an opportunity to come in before we help you take
I
this
would
to
lock
250.
that in, man.
Yeah, I think we all
Take it.
agree.
Take it, 100%.
Okay, I think you guys all want to
Thanks,
get
guys.
to the bar. So I think we'll end it there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.